This is the Podcast Lab. Subscribe now and never miss an episode.
Deep dive with us. Today we're going to be tackling something that might seem a little intimidating at first glance.
Yeah.
And that is the role of failure in achieving success. You might be out there prepping for some big challenge, or maybe you're just kind of fascinated by how those high achievers handle setbacks. But either way, we've got some really thought-provoking sources lined up for you.
Oh, yeah.
A mix of some motivational speakers and some in-depth articles, all exploring this kind of surprising connection between failure and success.
It really is interesting how often they come up together.
Right.
All these sources seem to agree that failure, well, it's not the opposite of success like you might think, but it's actually like a crucial part of the journey.
Okay, why is that? On the surface, it does seem kind of counterintuitive.
Well, think about it this way. When we fail, right, we get this incredibly valuable feedback. It forces us to adapt, to rethink our strategies, and ultimately it builds resilience. And, all of those are essential skills for achieving long-term success.
So it's less about avoiding failure altogether and more about learning to use it as a tool.
Exactly. It's about shifting our perspective. We wouldn't expect to master a new skill without making any mistakes along the way, right?
Right.
Failure is just part of that learning process.
Yeah, that makes sense. Steve Harvey had a really interesting point in one of the YouTube transcripts we were looking at. He talked about how even Michael Jordan, arguably the best basketball player of all time, missed over 700 game-winning shots in his career.
Wow.
It's a pretty staggering number, right?
Yeah.
But we tend to forget about all those misses because we focus so much on the successes. It's like 700 missed shots, and yet he's still considered a legend. I think that's really reassuring for anyone facing challenges.
It definitely puts things in perspective. And it ties in with the concept of a growth mindset, which is highlighted in one of the articles you shared.
Right, the pasted text.
Yeah.
What exactly is a growth mindset?
Essentially, it's the belief that your abilities aren't fixed, that you can always learn and improve, even through failures. It's about seeing those setbacks not as a reflection of your worth, but as opportunities for growth.
So instead of getting discouraged by setbacks, someone with a growth mindset would see them as valuable data. Almost like, okay, that didn't work. What can I learn from this, and how can I adjust my approach?
Precisely. And a great example of this is J.K. Rowling's story. You probably know this already, but her first Harry Potter book, it was rejected by 12 publishers before it finally found a home. Imagine if she had given up after the first, or even the 10th rejection.
Talk about perseverance. That's got to be tough to keep pushing forward even when you're facing that much rejection.
It takes incredible resilience. But it's not just about blind persistence. It's also about being open to feedback and willing to make changes along the way.
Which is something that Steve Jobs emphasized in his talk on failure, right? He talked about the importance of being willing to crash and burn, and even encourage people to ask for help when they need it.
That's right. He wasn't just talking about pushing through challenges blindly, but about learning, adapting, and even reaching out for support.
And speaking of reaching out for support, I love that anecdote he shared about calling Bill Hewlett as a kid. He was working on some electronics project and needed some parts, so he looked up Hewlett's number in the phone book and just called him.
Wow.
Right. And the amazing thing is, Hewlett not only gave him the parts, but also offered him a summer job. Talk about an initiative, right?
It's incredible.
Yeah,
it's a great example of how taking the initiative and seeking guidance can lead to unexpected opportunities, even in the face of what might seem like a setback. And it actually connects back to a practical tip from that pasted text article, seeking feedback.
Like getting a second opinion on your work.
Yeah.
Or asking someone you trust for advice.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we don't have all the answers and being willing to learn from others. Just like Jobs got guidance from Hewlett, seeking feedback can help us refine our approach and navigate challenges more effectively.
So it's not just about being tough and powering through, but also about knowing when to ask for help and being open to different perspectives.
Absolutely. And something else that really struck me from the Medium article by Hugh and Atto is that failure is inevitable. No matter how talented you are, no matter how well you prepare, you're going to face setbacks at some point. The key is how you react to them.
Okay, that's interesting. So it's less about avoiding failure altogether and more about mastering our response to it.
Exactly. And this connects to the lessons learned from failure section in the pasted text. It emphasizes that setbacks, they refine our resilience and self-awareness, which are crucial skills for navigating any challenge.
I like that. Kind of takes the pressure off, right? Knowing that failure is a normal part of the process And it's our reaction that really matters.
It's about shifting our focus from avoiding failure to learning from it and using it as a springboard for growth. And, I have to admit, I did chuckle a bit at Steve Harvey's take on this.
Yeah. What did he say?
He said, and I quote, "Every time you fail, say, whew, got that out the way." I mean, his enthusiasm is certainly contagious.
I love that. It's like acknowledging the setback, but not letting it derail you. And that brings to mind the point in pasted text about celebrating even small wins amidst challenges.
Yes. Acknowledging progress, no matter how small, can be incredibly motivating, especially when things get tough.
Like those little victories keep you going, even when you're facing bigger obstacles. It's a reminder that you're making progress, even if it doesn't feel like it all the time.
It's about recognizing that the path to success is rarely a straight line.
It does make you wonder, though, if everyone experiences failure at some point, what separates those who ultimately succeed? Is it just pure talent, or is there something more to it?
That's a great question. And honestly, it's something that researchers and thought leaders have been debating for years. Talent certainly plays a role, but it's definitely not the whole story. Many of the sources we're looking at today point to something else. The ability to not only cope with failure, but to actually learn and grow from those setbacks.
So it's not just about being tough or having a high pain tolerance. It's about actively engaging with the failure and figuring out what went wrong.
Precisely. It's about analyzing the situation, identifying what you could have done differently, and then using that knowledge to adjust your approach. It's like instead of letting the failure define you, you're using it to refine your strategies.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm thinking back to Steve Jobs' quote about being willing to crash and burn. It seems like he wasn't just advocating for recklessness, but for a willingness to take calculated risks, knowing that failure is a possibility.
Right. It's about moving beyond the fear of failure and embracing a more experimental mindset. It's like that famous Nike slogan, "Just do it." Sometimes the best way to learn is to just dive in and see what happens, even if it means making mistakes along the way.
And I'm also remembering Jobs' story about calling Bill Hewlett. That took a lot of guts. But it also shows the power of seeking guidance and mentorship. It seems like actively reaching out to people who have been there and done that can be a game changer when it comes to overcoming challenges.
Absolutely. Mentorship and networking can provide invaluable support and perspective, especially when you're facing setbacks. It's about surrounding yourself with people who can offer guidance, encouragement, and even constructive criticism.
Speaking of constructive criticism, the pasted text article had some really practical tips on how to reframe failure as a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block. It emphasized the importance of shifting your mindset to see setbacks as opportunities for learning and growth.
It's about moving away from that self-defeating inner critic and adopting a more compassionate and curious approach. Instead of asking yourself, why am I such a failure? You ask, what can I learn from this experience?
So it's not just about positive thinking, but about actively engaging in a process of self-reflection and analysis.
Exactly. It's about asking yourself, what are the contributing factors to this setback? What could I have done differently? What are the key takeaways that I can apply to future endeavors?
It sounds like it takes a certain level of honesty and self-awareness to really do that effectively.
It definitely does. It requires being willing to examine your role in the situation, both the good and the bad, without judgment or self-recrimination. And that can be challenging, but it's ultimately what allows you to learn and grow from those experiences.
Okay, so we've talked about reframing failure, seeking feedback, and taking calculated risks. But what happens when you actually hit that wall and experience a setback? How do you actually process that and pick yourself up and keep going?
That's where developing coping mechanisms and resilience strategies comes in. It's about having a toolbox of techniques that you can draw on when things get tough.
Like what kinds of techniques?
Well, one thing that a lot of the sources emphasize is the importance of self-care. When you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed, it's crucial to prioritize your physical and mental well-being. Things like getting enough sleep, eating healthy foods, and exercising regularly can make a huge difference in your ability to cope with challenges.
It's like making sure you have enough fuel in the tank to keep going right. You can't run on empty.
Exactly. And it's not just about physical self-care, but also about emotional self-care. Things like practicing mindfulness, journaling, or talking to a therapist can help you process your emotions and build resilience.
That makes sense. And I'm also remembering that point from the pasted text about celebrating even small wins. It's easy to get bogged down by the challenges, but acknowledging your progress, no matter how small, can be incredibly motivating.
It's about shifting your focus from what you haven't accomplished to what you have. It's about recognizing those small victories along the way and giving yourself credit for the effort, the learning, and the growth, even if the ultimate goal still feels far off.
It seems like it's all about maintaining perspective, both when you're facing setbacks and when you're celebrating successes.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that the path to success is rarely a straight line. There will be twists and turns, bumps, and even craters along the way, but it's your ability to adapt, learn, and keep moving forward that ultimately determines your success.
It's funny, we often talk about success as if it's this singular, clearly defined destination.
Yeah, like reaching the top of a mountain or crossing a finish line.
But the more we delve into this topic, the more I'm realizing that success, well, it's more like an ongoing journey.
A path with twists and turns, unexpected detours, maybe even a few scenic overlooks along the way.
Right, and those detours, those moments of failure, they're not just obstacles to be avoided, but opportunities to learn and grow.
Like that saying, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. Every experience, even the ones we might initially perceive as failures, they have the potential to teach us something valuable.
So instead of fearing failure, maybe we should be embracing it as a natural part of the process.
It's about shifting our perspective from I failed to what can I learn from this?
And that brings us back to that concept of a growth mindset, seeing challenges not as roadblocks, but as opportunities to refine our skills and strategies.
It's about recognizing that setbacks are inevitable, but they don't have to define us. It's our response to those setbacks that truly matters.
So if we're going to wrap this all up, I think the key takeaway is this. Failure isn't the enemy, it's a teacher.
Yeah, it's a valuable, albeit sometimes challenging companion on the journey to success.
It's about recognizing that the path to success isn't always smooth or predictable.
There will be bumps along the way, but it's our ability to navigate those bumps, to learn from them, and to keep moving forward. That ultimately determines our success.
You know what? Maybe that's a good place to leave our listener with a final thought to ponder. If everyone experiences failure at some point, what truly separates those who ultimately achieve their goals? Is it purely talent, or is it something more?
Is it that willingness to embrace the lessons of failure, to adapt and to persevere even when the going gets tough? That's something for you, our listener, to reflect on as you continue on your own unique journey.